This video carries on from part 2 and shows the final machining of the dog clutch, the manufacturing and fitting of the eccentrics and the gluing of the crank webs to the crankshafts for this paddle steamer engine. This has taken a bit of figuring out. This is one side of this dog clutch I'm going to use to link the split crankshafts of this paddle steamer engine, and the plan is that this, I don't know if you can see it really, but this now slides up and down on the end, slides up and down to connect to what I suppose will be a female flange on this end to link the two together. We've got the square end of one crankshaft and the square end of the dog clutch, and then the round bit slides over the crank, so everything can move up and down. The groove is for the actuating mechanism to slide this up and down, which I obviously haven't done that yet, but anyway, we shall see. Now I've got to make the female flange here with 3 slots for this thing to connect to. Nothing is pinned together yet, the crankshafts aren't done, everything's just sort of loosely assembled, nothing is finally fixed yet, for fear that things don't work out. So I'm going to mill what I suppose you might call the female part to make that part of the dog clutch for this paddle steamer engine. Fairly unstable setup, I would suggest, so slow and steady does it, 10,000 at a time. The slots need to be about 1/8 of an inch deep. I used the chuck in the lathe and indexed to carefully mark out the 3 lines where I want to produce these slots, and then with a sharp pointer in the milling collet I align the column with the centre line of the slot that I want to cut. Seems to work. And there we are, all done, and rather satisfyingly. Seems to match with its meeting part, so I'm happy about that. Might want a bit of a touch up with a file somewhere, but that'll be fine. Terrific. Right, the plan now is to make the 4 mild steel eccentrics that are going to work the Stephenson's valve gear. And the way I'm intending to do that, not quite sure if this will come out, I've used the lathe to mark out a centre line and the centre of this bit of 1/8" rod, and the plan is to pop the centre and then mark out the eccentric offset distance, which I think is 5/32, and then set that point to run true. When I've marked it out, of course, set that point to run true in a 4-jaw chuck in the lathe, and then drill and ream through 5/8 to slide over the crankshafts. So whatever happens, all these eccentrics will turn out the same, which is really quite important. and part them off, and there we have 4 eccentrics done. So using my normal homemade wobbler approach, I have set the eccentric where the sheaves are going to be bored 3/8. I've set that to run true in the 4-jaw, and you can tell that because the pointer isn't really moving at the tailstock end. So the point where this 3/8 bore is going to be put through is actually spot on. Using the small 4-jaw, I haven't used my big one, I've used a small one. So the plan is to part this off and then affix it firmly to the end of the eccentric for the pump ram. That's going to drive a pump, to fix it to the end of that, and then the theory is this bit will slide along and engage with this bit, but only in one position, because that's what I want. I'm using my very homemade fixed steady for a bit of support while I part off the end of this dog, or whatever you call it, I want for this engine. This is a sort of dry run on the proposed crankshaft assembly, and it doesn't work. As I strongly suspected, by the time I've made and fitted this sort of dog clutch arrangement so the 2 halves of the crankshaft can be operated independently, there isn't enough width here, because these 2 eccentrics for the valve gear are supposed to be in there, and as you can see, there's absolutely no room at all. I can pinch a bit by machining this boss off, which isn't really necessary, but in essence the gap between these 2 side plates needs to be around 17mm, I reckon, wider. So I will have to attend to that and reposition anything. I'm not surprised, because I sort of knew when I made this arrangement that it was going to throw all the drawing dimensions completely off, but decided to make all this lot first and then have a bit of a measure up to see what I needed to do. Nothing is fixed, the crank webs or anything like that, nothing is fixed, they're all just flopping about, so no big deal really. The pleasing part is that the sort of dog arrangement does disconnect, and does reconnect, because I only want it to connect in one place, so that when I've sorted it all out, the crank orientations remain at 90 degrees. So you know, that's cool really. Nothing is lubricated, everything's a bit tight at the moment, but I'm actually fairly happy with that part of it. Cool. The crankshafts for this engine are going to be glued and pinned, because as I think I mentioned before, in my view, silver soldering makes such a mess. So what I've made is a very sort of rough gauge, and that's dead vertical, so that this part is at the right height, so that when I put it under, put it under the crank pin, trust me, the crank webs, I mean, I can't do it because my finger's in the way, but are pretty level. I prefer to do the drilling of these crank webs in my drilling machine because I doubt my ability to use a hand drill without breaking the fairly small drill. This little bit of shim stock is just to create, it's about 5 there, just to create a little bit of clearance here between the crank web and the bearing, so we get a nice fit. I'm not advertising or anything, and I don't know if anybody else does this, but to clean up parts which are going to be Loctited and pinned together, what I use is this stuff that you buy from the local car accessories place. Disc brake cleaner seems to work very well to clean these things up, and you only lose a minute amount, so it don't cost a fortune. Very good. Right, similar job again, except I would like the cranks to be set at 90 degrees with the dog clutch thingy engaged. So I've got a square to set this crank vertical, and then a sort of homemade height gauge here, so that in theory, near as damn it, these cranks should be at 90 degrees. That's the plan anyway. I'm going to let the Loctite set a little bit before I drill the pins through, because I would rather not have any of this lot move if I can avoid it. The only thing that remains now is to saw out and carefully remove these two pieces here which pass through, and then the cranks will be done. Needs a bit of fettling, but it turns okay. So and we're at right angles, which is what we wanted. So looking good. I've got to remove the parts in the middle, but I shan't do that at this stage until I've actually got the cylinders fixed and machined, because that'll be quite the connecting rods need to be in the center of these two cranks, and this will help me lining up the cylinder bores with a pointer to both in the middle of the crank, up and down, and the middle that way. So I shall leave the removal of the middle for a bit later on when I'm working on the cylinders and the connecting rods. Anyway, that's it for the moment.